Hello everyone. Welcome back to the series of lectures in hematology. In continuation with our journeys in leukemias, now we'll be moving on to chronic leukemias, which includes chronic myeloid and chronic lymphoid leukemia. So let us begin with chronic myeloid leukemia. So what is CML? CML is clonal myeloproliferative stem cell neoplasm. So this is a clonal myeloproliferative stem cell neoplasm of predominantly the myeloid lineage. So it's a clonal myeloproliferative stem cell neoplasm of the myeloid lineage. Okay, so whenever we speak of chronic myeloid leukemia, we have to remember the gene that is involved is basically the BCR-ABL gene, which is a chimeric gene that is constitutively encoding tyrosine kinase, right? So what happens is that whenever there is a mutation, so there is a gene called the BCR-ABL gene, and there is a balanced translocation that happens between one particular chromosome and another chromosome. The numbers are very important, the 922 translocation. Now when this happens between the chromosome number 9, there is a balanced translocation. So there is some genetic material which is transferred from the long arm of chromosome number 9 to chromosome number 22, right? So in this process, there is a chimeric gene that is formed, which is the BCR-ABL gene. Now once this mutation happens, there is constitutive expression of a tyrosine kinase, and hence there is an increased amount of tyrosine kinase, increased activation of the cell and increased proliferation of the stem cells. Okay, so let us understand that a little bit more in detail. So this particular chromosome is what we call as by a specific name, which is the Philadelphia chromosome, right? So if you look at this particular image, right? So here you have 9 and chromosome number 22. So chromosome number 9 and chromosome number 22. So on chromosome number 9, the portion is the Q34 portion, and in chromosome number 22, we have the 11.2, and there is a balanced translocation. What do you mean by that? That is one portion which is removed from chromosome number 9 goes and attaches itself to chromosome number 22. The portion which is removed from chromosome number 22 gets attached to chromosome number 9, right? So it is like a crossover like this, right? So this is the ultimate product that is formed, and this ultimate product results in a chimeric gene activation, which is the BCR-ABL. Right? So if you just look at this a little bit more in detail, you will notice that normally the chromosome number 9 is usually longer than chromosome number 22, and we have an ABL1 gene which is present here. And here we have the BCR gene on chromosome number 22. So how is the translocation happening? Can you see here that the ABL removes and goes and gets attached to the region there, and the BCR gets removed and comes and attaches here. Okay, so this is what we call as the balanced translocation or translocation 922. Now what happens is that you can have different types of proteins or types of translocations and the length of the chromosome that is generated, and this is divided into 3 types as a minor BCR, major BCR and micro BCR, depending upon the number of repeats which are obtained, right? So this basically depends upon at what length the breakpoint is happening. Okay, so can you see here that if the breakpoint is resulting in what type of repeats? You can have a 210 repeats, you can have a 190 repeat, or you can have a 230 repeats, where depending upon the site of the breakpoint in each of the chromosomes. Right? So this type of repeat where you have a P210 type of a chimeric abnormality, that is the most common type. And then we have the micro BCR and the major BCR, which are also the other forms which can be generated. Okay, so this is about how the Philadelphia chromosome is formed. So what are we learning? We are learning chronic myeloid leukemia, and we have learned what exactly happens in the Philadelphia chromosome. So let us understand the epidemiology of chronic myeloid leukemia. So this is more common in males than females, and again the chronic myeloid leukemia is also frequently found in the 7th decade. And the only etiology that we have found being associated with CML is radiation exposure. Okay, it is radiation exposure. We have not found any association with inherited mutations or germline mutations of sorts. So, what is the pathophysiology? We have just now learned. So, when there is a BCR-ABL balanced translocation, this results in an increased amount of tyrosine kinase activity. So, tyrosine kinase is basically a molecule which basically helps in cell proliferation. It helps in cell proliferation. So, there is constitutively increased expression of tyrosine kinase and hence there is increased cell proliferation, and this is the one which basically results to increased production of myeloid precursors and it results in CML. So, let us understand the clinical features with which a patient of CML is going to present. Right. So, the most common clinical presentation is in the form of what we call as the chronic phase of CML. So, usually a patient of a 7th decade, he just comes for a routine RBC and he finds that his total counts are elevated, right. So, this is the most common type. So, up to 50% of the individuals in fact in CML remain asymptomatic. They remain asymptomatic and they are usually picked up only on doing a CBC and they present in the chronic phase of CML. Okay. In this phase of CML, you may find evidence of organomegaly, especially splenomegaly. In certain cases, you may find evidence of anemia because the myeloid precursors are beginning to replace the bone marrow, and in those cases, the patient may complain of severe fatigue. If the WBC counts are extremely high, there is a small chance that in the chronic phase, there can be evidence of hyperviscosity. So, whenever there is hyperviscosity because of increased number of cells, the flow of the blood is reduced and hence you can have CNS manifestations. They can also block the arteries and you can have pulmonary manifestations as well. Okay. So, this is about how usually a CML patient present. 50% of the individuals are asymptomatic and they are usually just diagnosed in the chronic phase. Then you have to remember that as per WHO, there are certain other variants of clinical presentations which are the accelerated phase and the blastic phase. Okay. So, CML can go into something called as the accelerated phase and blastic phase. Now, in accelerated phase, the blasts are 10 to 19% in the blood or bone marrow and there is increased basophils for more than 20% in the blood. And this is what we call as the accelerated phase. Now, in the blastic phase, what happens is that the blasts are more than 20% in the blood or in the marrow. There is evidence of sometimes a myeloid sarcoma and the lymphoblast percentage is also more than 5%. So, if the patient goes into an accelerated phase or blastic phase, they may present with fever, they may present with weight loss, they may present with increase in symptoms. There can be rapid worsening of the splenomegaly because of increased number of blasts. The basophils in the blood can release histamine. So, increased amount of histamine can cause flushing, it can result in diarrhea and so on. So, this is how patient of CML is usually stable. If he worsens, he can go into accelerated phase or blastic phase and these are the symptoms with which they can present. They can also have bone pains. Okay, clear? So, how do you differentiate accelerated phase from blastic phase? In accelerated phase, usually the percentage of blast is 10 to 19%. In blastic phase, it's more than 20%. Okay, so how are they presenting? They present with fever, joint pains, bleeding and other systemic involvement. So, what are the other things that you can find in the accelerated and blastic phase? There is a sudden worsening of the organomegaly, sudden lymphadenopathy and basophilia, where if there is increased basophils, increased histamine, there can be vasoconstriction, diarrhea, flushing and so on. Okay, fine. So, let us look at the pathology of CML. So, you can see in the blood as well as the bone marrow. In the blood peripheral smear, you can find large number of leukocytes. There is leukocytosis and you can see that most of them are myeloblasts and myeloid precursors, multiple forms, multiple types of myeloid precursors with shift to left. Okay, so this is what you will see in the peripheral smear, and when you do a CBC, you will find that the total counts are elevated, right? Apart from that, certain other laboratory values which you will have to be focusing on, the B12, the uric acid and the LDH levels are increased, very important. B12, uric acid and LDH are increased, and very importantly, the leukocyte alkaline phosphatase score is low. Okay, so when you speak about the differential diagnosis for CML, the differential diagnosis for CML is usually something called as Leukemoid reaction. So what is Leukemoid reaction? So in conditions like sepsis, there can be a reactionary elevation of the WBC count. So this can exceed, or this can increase to a level similar to that of CML, and it can mimic a CML, and this is what we call as a Leukemoid reaction, right? But in a Leukemoid reaction, you will find that the leukocyte alkaline phosphatase score or the LAP score, it is increased in Leukemoid reaction, whereas it is low in CML. Okay, so this is the importance of the LAP score in the diagnosis of CML. Okay, so we look at the blood, we look at increased B12 uric acid LDH, low LAP score. Fine. Then nowadays we do not require all of that only for the diagnosis. In the era of cytogenetics, we do a lot of other testing, and very importantly, the presence of this Philadelphia chromosome is very important when you have to diagnose CML. Apart from that, additional mutations can be seen like a trisomy 8, double Philadelphia chromosome number 17. If these additional mutations are present, it usually indicates poor prognosis. Okay, so presence of additional mutations usually represents a poor prognosis. Fine, but the most characteristic mutation will be the presence of the Philadelphia chromosome, which is translocation 920. Fine, so let us move on to the treatment of chronic myeloid leukemia. So there are two named scores which you have to remember, that is the SOCAL scoring system and the UTOS scoring system, which are risk scoring systems used in CML. So these are available as online calculators. You just have to enter a few values and you will get these scores. So remember the named scores, SOCAL scoring system and UTOS scoring system. Okay, so similar to how we had learnt in our chapter on ALL, even CML becomes a very easily manageable disease because of the development of FISH and PCR, and we again aim for molecular remission. So monitoring in a CML patient is brought about by molecular genetics, by FISH fluorescent in situ hybridization and PCR technique. What are we looking at? We are looking at the BCR-ABL copy numbers. Okay, so you just cannot go on continuously repeating a bone marrow because it's a painful procedure, right? So in this era of molecular diagnostics, we do a peripheral smear for BCR-ABL repeats and you monitor them for molecular remission. Okay, so molecular remission is given by your concept of minimal residual disease or molecular remission. So molecular remission 3-stage is when the copies are less than 0.1% in the blood. That means they are less than 1 in 1000 of the bone marrow cells or the cells which are examined. Then MMR stage 4 or MR stage 4 is less than 0.01% and MR stage 4.5 is less than 0.032%. And in fact, this is the one that we actually target. And if the patient has been stable and achieved an MMR 4.5 for more than 2 years, then in fact you can also consider stopping him of treatment. Okay, so this is about how do you monitor a patient of CML. Now, let us understand the various drugs which are used in treatment. So the first and the most important drug which is universally given to any patient of a chronic myeloid leukemia is Hydroxyurea, which helps in reducing the tumor burden, right? And what we have to know is that, so after the introduction of these group of agents that we call as tyrosine kinase inhibitors, the survival of CML has improved dramatically. Okay, so what are tyrosine kinase inhibitors that are used? The first agent which is used is Imatinib. Okay, so Imatinib has been approved for use in all phases, in the chronic phase, accelerated phase as well as the blastic phase, and it is usually given at a dose of 400 mg daily. Okay, so Imatinib again has a risk of myelosuppression and also it has a risk of effusions. Right? So this is basically a first generation TKI. But we found that there are certain specific mutations which basically confer resistance to Imatinib. So that resulted in the development of second and third generation TKIs. So Dasatinib, Nilotinib and Bosutinib are second generation TKIs, and Ponatinib is basically a third generation TKI. Right? So you understand that the second generation TKIs are also used in all phases, and Ponatinib is a third generation TKI which is optimal in which mutation? The mutation you have to remember is T3-151. Okay, T3-151 mutation, where there is failure of more than 2 tyrosine kinase inhibitors, then you use Ponatinib. Okay. So, some of the important side effects that you have to remember: Dasatinib causes myelosuppression, pleural pulmonary effusions, pulmonary hypertension. Nilotinib, you will have to remember, increased risk of arterio-occlusive crisis and pancreatitis. Bosutinib is associated with predominantly GI toxicity. Ponatinib has a high risk of skin rashes, arterio-occlusive disease and pancreatitis. Now, if there is failure of 2 or more TKIs, we can use a third gen TKI, which is Ponatinib, or you can also use omacitaxine meposuccinate, where there is failure of more than 2 tyrosine kinase inhibitors. The newer drug which is used is omacitaxine meposuccinate. Okay, so this is about the various drugs which are used in the management of CML. Okay, fine. So with this, we have come to the end of our discussion on chronic myeloid leukemia. Now let us move on to the next type of chronic leukemia that we should be knowing, which is your chronic lymphocytic leukemia. So how does a chronic lymphocytic leukemia present? So there are certain important clinical features that you have to know. So chronic lymphocytic leukemia usually is asymptomatic. So most of the patients are asymptomatic. So whenever they do a CBC, they just find that the lymphocyte percentage is extremely high. The median age of presentation again here is around in the 7th or 8th decade, and they usually have a very good survival. The survival is very good and it is more common in males than females. Another odd feature that you can remember here is that there have been no risk factors identified. We found that in CML, radiation is considered to be a risk factor. In AML, you found lot of genetic mutations, but in CLL, there is no evidence of any risk factors for the risk or reason for developing a CLL, and most of them usually have familial predisposition. Okay, so most of them are asymptomatic, survival is good, they do not have any risk factors, and familial is the most often cause. Fine. So what is the pathophysiology? Here the pathophysiology that we should know is that there is a defective apoptosis of naive B cells. Because of this defect in the apoptosis, the B cell lymphocytes usually increase in number and there is a B cell lymphocytosis. So let us look at the peripheral smear in CLL. You can find there are increased proportions of these small round blue cells, or a sheet of blue cells, and this is what is seen in CLL. And here you can see that while forming the smear, some of the cells get smudged, and this is what we call as the smudge cells. Smudge cells is a characteristic feature which is seen in CLL. Now, most of the time it is asymptomatic, but some of the CLL can undergo a transformation which is called as the Richter transformation. So, what do you mean by Richter transformation? So, the transforming of a low-grade neoplasm like CLL or an SLL, which is a small lymphocytic leukemia, into a high-grade neoplasm like a diffuse large B-cell lymphoma is what we call as Richter transformation. So, there is a small risk of this CLL patients being transferred from a low-grade CLL to a high-grade DLBCL, and this is what we call as Richter transformation. And once a patient undergoes Richter transformation, what are the symptoms with which they are going to present? They are going to present with a sudden worsening of the lymph nodes. There is going to be lymphadenopathy. There is going to be B symptoms. What is B symptoms? Weight loss of more than 10% in 6 months, fever more than 100.4, elevated LDH. So all of these are going to be found when the patient is undergoing Richter transformation. So every time that you see a patient of CLL, remember that there is a chance of this Richter's transformation. Okay, fine. Now, the Rye and Binet staging system is something very important staging system which is used in the staging of CLL. So, what are the characteristic features of the Rye and Binet staging system? So, according to the Rye staging system, CLL can be classified as low risk, intermediate risk and high risk CLL. So in low risk, there is only evidence of lymphocytosis. Okay, so lymphocytes are increased, so this is just low risk. But if there is a lymphocytosis with lymphadenopathy, with or without organomegaly, then this is a stage 1 or 2. In a stage 3 or 4, you have lymphocytosis with anemia, thrombocytopenia. So all the other cell lines are also getting affected due to bone marrow involvement, right? So there is bone marrow involvement, lymph node involvement, organ involvement. So then immediately it becomes a stage 3 or 4. Okay, so that is your Rye staging system. Then according to Binet staging system, if there are less than 3 areas of lymphadenopathy, it is stage A. More than 3 areas of lymphadenopathy, non-contiguous lymph node areas are increased, then it is stage B. And again, if there is involvement of marrow and cytopenias, hemoglobin drop, platelet drop, then it is stage C. Okay. So remember that CLL is going to most often present as asymptomatic increased lymphocytosis. But if there is involvement of lymphadenopathy or organomegaly, it goes into stage 2. If there is evidence of marrow involvement with cytopenias, it goes into stage 3 or 4 as per Rye staging. And Binet staging takes into account the various areas of lymph node that is involved. Less than 3 areas, stage A, more than 3 areas, stage B, marrow involvement, stage C. So there are certain parameters which are used again in any other malignancy to prognosticate the CLL as well. So you cannot remember everything, just remember what are the parameters that are involved. So P53 mutation is present or not is given a high risk score. IGH rearrangements is present or not, or IGH mutational status, especially if it is unmutated, it is given a score of 2. Then beta 2 microglobulin concentration higher, then given a score of 2. Then clinical stage and age is taken into consideration. Okay. So what they can test you on is IGHV mutational status. Unmutated, not mutated is considered to be a higher risk. Okay. So why is this risk scoring or a CLL International Prognostic Index required, which is called a CLL IPI? Because you can determine the rate of survival. So if the risk score is 0 to 1, you can see that the survival is very, very good, usually more than 90%. But if the score is very high, 7 to 10, then the survival can reduce to as low as 23%. So this is the CLL IPI prognostic index. Now, all CLLs need not be treated. There are certain criteria for which the CLLs have to be initiated on treatment, and what are those criteria? So 1. Evidence of progressive marrow failure, worsening of anemia, thrombocytopenia not due to autoimmune destruction. Always remember that in the chapter on autoimmune hemolytic anemia also we had learned that CLL can be associated with what type of autoimmune hemolytic anemia? It can be associated with cold agglutinin disease. So cold agglutinin disease can also cause a drop in hemoglobin or platelets. So if it is not of autoimmune etiology and there is evidence of bone marrow involvement, then the CLL patient falls into Rye stage 3 or 4 and he definitely needs treatment. If there is massive splenomegaly, then definitely he needs treatment. Or if there is progressive splenomegaly, there is a chance of Richter transformation, so he needs splenomegaly. Massive progressive symptomatic lymphadenopathy, again it means there is a chance of Richter transformation, patient requires treatment. Progressive lymphocytosis, increase of more than 50% in 2 months, or lymphocyte doubling time is less than 6 months. It means that the disease is very, very active and hence the patient needs treatment. If there is autoimmune anemia or thrombocytopenia that is not responsive to standard therapy, what is the standard therapy? Steroids. It is not responsive to steroids. Then the patient requires treatment for CLL. Then extranodal involvement, constitutional symptoms, which is basically your B symptoms, fever, weight loss, etc. Then you definitely need to treat the patient. Okay, so this is very, very clear and easy to remember. So what are the regimens which are used in the treatment of CLL? So we use an FCR regimen, which is fludarabine, cyclophosphamide and rituximab. So FCR regimen, but the more commonly used regimen is a BR regimen, which is the bendamustine rituximab. Bendamustine rituximab. Okay, fine. So this is about chronic leukemias in a gist for you. So what all have we learned? We have learned about CML. Now we have learned about CLL as well. So in the CLL, you will have to remember especially about the staging and what are the indications for treatment of CLL. Thank you.